How do we actually get people to participate? And by participate, I don't just mean people answering our questions when we call on them. I mean real engaged participation, where people are talking to each other, building on each other's ideas, and teaching each other things. This is a question I've been sort of obsessed with ever since I became a teacher, and from talking with other educators, I know I'm not alone. For a long time, I thought that the solution was simply more interaction. So more activity, more questions, maybe more tech tools. But that approach required a lot of work for me, and I found that it was kind of hit or miss. Sometimes it would create the appearance of participation without actually leading to more engagement. It wasn't until I led more and more workshops and I could try different things that one distinction became really clear to me. And the clarity that came from understanding this distinction was pretty revolutionary to me, especially to how I design workshops, and it's what I want to share with you today. So here's how this video is going to go. First, I'll introduce a simple but powerful framework to understand what actually drives participation. Then I'll show you how I've used this framework to help me design hundreds of workshops so that you can really see how to put this tool into practice. And then finally, I'll walk you through one of my favorite activities to create sustained, engaged participation. And it's one that I return to all the time because it works and also it makes me feel really confident as a facilitator. Okay, so let's jump in. So the first distinction that I want to make crystal clear is the difference between something being interactive and something being engaging. I admit that for a long time, I didn't really think about those things as two different things. And I think that often they are treated as one and the same. But something being interactive means that participants are asked to do something. The level of interactivity can be defined by how much and how often any kind of action is solicited from the participants. Engagement, on the other hand, is about how invested the participants are in the content. So how much is it holding their attention? How meaningful does it feel to them? Figuring out how to make these two work together so that it creates real engaged participation is crucial, and it's where today's framework comes in. All right, so here's a grid with 4 quadrants. On the y-axis, we can graph how engaging something is, and on the x-axis, we can graph how interactive it is. The grid helps us see clearly that interaction and engagement are not the same thing, and that you can have one without the other. So let's think of examples for each of these quadrants. Let's start by thinking about something that is neither interactive nor engaging. And here you can basically think about a lecture that you really don't care about. For example, for me, that could be a lecture on driving rules in England. I have no plans to move there, no interest in road rules. Let's face it, I can't even drive in my own country. So I would have no emotional investment in this. My engagement would be 0, and the interactivity of the experience would also be 0 since it's a lecture. Now let's look at something that is engaging but not interactive. And actually here we can choose this same example of the lecture, except in this case, let's say I've just been told that I am moving to England tomorrow and expected to drive across the whole country. Even if the presentation was dull, I would suddenly become very engaged in that content because it would be relevant to me, and I'd be very stressed out about doing it, okay? Next, let's think about an experience that is highly interactive but not engaging. I will stick with the driving example because I'm currently trying to get my driver's license in France, and it's the bane of my existence, okay? Because it's freaking impossible and expensive. But I digress. I'm telling you this because one of the instructors that I spend way too many hours with in a car spends the entire class asking me pointless questions. He will turn to me and constantly be like, okay, so Maureen, now you're about to stop at the... And I have to be like, red light. And then he'll ask me another question and he'll be like, oh, look, there's a pide. I have to be like, strien. He's like, great, so that means that you hit the... I'm like, break? I've tried not answering, believe me, but then it's just awkward and he just keeps asking it again and again until I give him the answer that he's looking for. Anyway, I'm sure this instructor goes home feeling really good about how interactive his lessons are. And he's not wrong. They are interactive, they're just not engaging. I'm hating on him, but I think this is a very human impulse, especially as an educator. I know that I've done a version of this myself, and I connected what this instructor was doing to facilitation because I've literally seen things like this play out in workshops very often. I think that interaction for its own sake is a double-edged sword because sometimes moments of interactivity are really helpful to boost energy, but they can also drain the energy that participants need for engagement. So the million-dollar question is, how do we make interaction engaging? So let's think about that because this grid can help. What we can tell is that something can become more engaging by becoming more relevant to the participants. That's why the lecture on driving rules would only become engaging to me if I was going to move there. But we don't have to rely on relevance alone, and that's a good thing because we aren't mind readers. We don't know what exactly is going to feel relevant to the participants before we walk into the room. And sometimes even the content isn't relevant to them yet. The key then is that we need to make our content interactive in the service of making it more relevant. So how do we do that? Well, I want to tell you very briefly about a cognitive bias called the IKEA effect that helps us understand how we do it. The bias tells us that we value something more when we've had a hand in shaping it. Its name comes from the fact that people often value furniture that they built themselves more than objectively better furniture that's been built by someone else. This is because effort creates attachment, and this applies to ideas as well. The effort we put into shaping something directly affects how much we value it. This is why it can be really hard to recognize that our idea is bad if we put a lot of work and time into coming up with it. This is why participation only works sustainably when people can see the impact of their contribution. The good news is that that is what good facilitation already allows us to do. One of the core skills of facilitation is helping participants surface contributions and then helping them see connections between those contributions and the ideas being discussed. That's how interaction becomes engaging, right? The content is visibly shaped by the group in ways that matter to them. So I hope that's clear. And now I just briefly want to tell you how I use this framework. Basically, I use it to plan moments of interaction and engagement and make sure those two things are working together. And I also use it as a diagnostic tool in order to assess my curriculum before delivering it. One of the biggest things I would say that this graph has helped me do is to reverse my moments of interactivity. Let me tell you what I mean by that. I used to foreground my activities that were just interactive for the sake of raising energy at the start of my curriculum. So think icebreakers. And then I would save all my moments of interaction that were more engaging for the end. So think debriefs. But actually, you want to make sure that you have moments that are both interactive and engaging at the start of new curricular segments. That's so important, and it's sort of counter to the conventional wisdom, I feel like. If anything, I think that icebreakers are better for the middle or the end of a segment because that's when energy dips. But energy is already high at the start, so instead use those moments of interaction to show participants that they're shaping the knowledge with their participation and that that knowledge or that content is relevant to them. So I want to tell you one of my very favorite simple ways to do that at the beginning of a workshop or a curricular segment, and it's called concept mapping. I usually build it around 3 questions. I will expose myself that I do use this all the time, so you are warned if you ever take one of my workshops. But basically what I do is I start by asking participants to define a concept. And that concept is important to the workshop, of course. So recently I facilitated a DEI style workshop that was focused on understanding class differences. I began by asking the group, how do they define class? So, either actual definitions or just words that come to mind. And I created a mind map of the different responses. What's important here is to help participants see why their contributions matter. So you don't just take 1 or 2 responses and then move on, but you really keep harvesting responses, helping them reach more nuance and depth and really just building meaning together. So once that was done, I asked my second question, which was, is class just about having money? And I prefaced it by saying, oh, I like noticed that the words wealth and money have come up a few times, and that makes me wonder, is class just about having money? So see how I made it seem like a very natural transition, even though I had planned the second question ahead of time. But it's because I knew that money would come up in that first definition, and that I thought this was a helpful distinction to make. That's the thing I love with concept mapping, is that you can plan it ahead of time, but still look very natural and responsive in the moment. And so I find that this is just really helpful to build my confidence at the start of a workshop, because by the time I'm done, I'm like in flow, and I feel like the people are like, yeah, she's a good facilitator. She knows what she's talking about. The third question was, how does this distinction help you understand experiences that you've had in your own life? So of course, no one had to share, but it actually led to a lot of people sharing how the distinction between class and money manifested in their own lives and in the lives of the people that they knew. So this moment of interaction did two things. First, the participants saw right away how their contributions shaped the learning. Second, the topic of the workshop, class differences and belonging, became personally meaningful to everybody in the room. Seeing the participants engaged and knowing that I had facilitated that also just made me feel more confident and deliver a better workshop. If you have made it up until this point in the video, then I think you would be an excellent match for my dialogue facilitation trainings. If you're interested, I would love to have you there, and more information will be coming out about it very soon. So sign up to the waitlist if you want to be the first to be notified when it's released out into the world. So I hope that this video gave you a few aha moments about how to think about the moments of interaction in your workshops or classroom, and that you'll hang on to this distinction between something being interactive and something being engaging. I really do think that one activity that is interactive and engaging is better than 10 activities that are interactive but not engaging. The one nuance I would add to that is that when you are doing remote learning, sometimes a lot of moments of interaction are necessary because it's easier to lose participants. And so sometimes just asking them to click things and type things is useful to keeping the energy up. That might be a topic for another video, but for now, I hope that you enjoyed learning about the framework, that you will take it and use it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.